You always have disappointments. But if you have the character which makes you go on striving, I think the young people of today have greater opportunity.
The young people of today have greater opportunity. Eleanor Roosevelt buried her mother, brother, and father before she turned 11. But that childhood tragedy was just the beginning. By 1962, when she died at 78, she had endured betrayals that would break most people. Her husband's affair, her daughter's shocking deception, and a secret relationship that stayed hidden for decades. When her personal journals were finally released, they revealed the truth about her darkest moments. The woman who fought for human rights was fighting a war inside herself that nobody knew about. She was born on October 11, 1884 in New York City. Her name was Anna Eleanor Roosevelt. Her father was Elliot Roosevelt, younger brother of Theodore Roosevelt. Her mother, Anna Hall Roosevelt, was beautiful and proud of her beauty. But she looked at Eleanor and saw none of it. She mocked her own daughter, called her granny, and kept reminding her how plain she looked. Eleanor, even as a small child, learned to hide how she felt. Her father was charming, but broken inside. Alcohol gripped him hard. He would disappear for days, come back trembling, and sometimes lose control of himself. Her mother would get horrible migraines and Eleanor would be the one sitting beside her reading aloud for hours to ease the pain. She was barely 4 but already acting like the adult in the room. In December 1892, her mother caught Theory and died at just 29. Eleanor was 8. She remembered the goodbye. Her mother whispered it softly and then she was gone. That night and many after, Eleanor lay in the dark, silent and scared. The house felt cold even when the fire was lit. Just a few months later, in May 1893, her younger brother, Elliot Jr., died of scarlet fever. He was only 4. Eleanor felt like she had failed him. She carried that guilt quietly for the rest of her life. Then, in August 1894, her father jumped from a window. He didn't die right away. He had a seizure the next day and passed at 34. The world told people it was heart disease. But Eleanor knew the truth. Before she turned 11, she had buried her mother, her brother, and her father. Her childhood was over before it had ever really begun. She and her surviving brother Hall were sent to live with their grandmother, Mary Livingston Ledlow Hall in Tivoli, New York. The house was large but cold in feeling. Her grandmother ran it with stiff rules and sharp expectations. Eleanor wore uncomfortable braces to straighten her back. She dressed in clothes that made her feel even more awkward. She wasn't allowed to giggle loudly. Joy had a curfew in that house. Eleanor called herself a solemn child and often said she felt like an old woman trapped in a girl's body. But even with the strictness, there was a quiet sort of safety. Her grandmother fed her, clothed her, kept her upright. That was enough for a while. Then came Allenswood. In 1899, Eleanor was sent across the ocean to a girls' school in England. The headmistress, Marie Sylvester, didn't just run a school. She lit fires in minds. She challenged Eleanor to think, to feel, to act. They traveled together, walking through factories, poor neighborhoods, and galleries. Eleanor's worldview cracked open. She saw how the poor lived. She spoke French. She listened. She changed. Marie became her anchor, her first real mentor. Maybe even the first person Eleanor ever felt truly understood her. When Marie died in 1905, Eleanor kept her letters close for the rest of her life. Back in New York in 1902, Eleanor returned to a world of ballrooms and society rules, but she didn't fit into any of it. While others danced and drank champagne, she was slipping off ta volontiers on Rivington Street, deep in the immigrant slums of the Lower East Side. She taught dance to children who didn't have shoes. She walked past broken windows and into overcrowded rooms filled with the smell of sickness and smoke. She felt more alive there than she ever did at any tea party. She wrote about the families she met. She wanted to help them, to listen, to show up, and she did. Her uncle became president in 1901, and that meant she had to smile and curtsy in front of people who judged her dress, her speech, even her posture. In 1902, she had her formal debut in the White House alongside her cousin Alice Roosevelt. She hated it. The gowns, the whispers, the pressure to marry well. She wrote in her letters that the whole thing felt like a trap. She wasn't meant for a life off gowns and gossip. She wanted meaning. Then came Franklin. On March 17, 1905, she married Franklin D. Roosevelt. She was 20. The wedding wasn't held in a grand church, but in her grandmother's house. President Theodore Roosevelt, her uncle, walked her down the aisle. The marriage wasn't just about love. It was a union of two rising American families, but it came with a price. Franklin's mother, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, inserted herself into everything. She had a townhouse built that connected to Eleanor's home by a sliding door. She crossed that line often, watching, judging, correcting. She told the children that she was more of a mother than Eleanor. It cut deep. When Franklin had an affair with Lucy Mercer in 1916, Eleanor found the letters. They had been hidden in a suitcase. She had hired Lucy herself. The betrayal burned. Eleanor offered a divorce, but Franklin refused. His advisors and especially his mother threatened to ruin him if he agreed. So the affair ended on paper and the marriage shifted into something different, a political partnership, not a romantic one. In 1909, Eleanor lost her first son, Franklin Jr., to influenza. He was just 8 months old. She collapsed under the weight of it. She blamed herself. She stayed in her room for days. Her past kept echoing. Her mother gone, her father gone, her brother gone, and now her baby too. She fell into depression and carried it with her through the years, often behind a quiet smile. In 1945, the final wound came. Franklin died at Warm Springs. Eleanor wasn't there, but Lucy Mercer was. Her daughter Anna had arranged it, knowing the truth and keeping it from her mother. Eleanor was shattered all over again. The pain of betrayal came back. Even in his final hours, Franklin had chosen Lucy, and Anna had helped him. It created a silence between mother and daughter that never fully healed. In 1917, Eleanor Roosevelt left the comfort of her privileged world and entered the bloody chaos of World War I. She didn't wait for someone to assign her a role. She volunteered with the Red Cross and began driving ambulances near the front lines in France. Each shift lasted up to 12 hours. Bombs still echoed across the field as she loaded the injured, many still screaming, some silent with shock. The air smelled like metal and blood. She watched men missing limbs burn beyond recognition. Some no older than her own children. One boy was just 17. He clutched a photo of his sister and died in her arms. Nights were filled with the tremble of distant explosions, days were spent sewing wounds with shaking fingers. She never forgot the cries or the silence. The war carved something deep into her. And for the rest of her life, she hated war with a quiet, burning certainty. By 1920, the war had ended. But a new fight had begun. Women had won the vote, and Eleanor joined the League of Women Voters. She didn't just attend meetings, she went straight into the crowded immigrant neighborhoods of New York. Campaigned for the League of Nations. Bottles were thrown at her. She was arrested once just for handing out flyers. Riots injured 50 people that year. German-American families were driven from neighborhoods. She kept showing up. Democracy, she believed, needed women. The book became a quiet rallying cry. Thousands read it. Many ran for office. More voted for the first time. Eleanor's courage was contagious. By 1929, she had turned to radio. Her broadcasts during the Dust Bowl pulled in 60 million listeners, more than half the U.S. population. In 1933, she described dust storms blotting out the sun, families choking on the air, children coughing blood. One farmer told her, "I haven't seen the sun in a week." She turned those stories into pressure. The Resettlement Administration was born. Federal aid flowed. People called her a socialist. She kept going. Her voice cut through the static. It didn't sound like power. It sounded like someone who cared. Starting March 6, 1933, Eleanor began holding women-only press conferences. The first one packed 35 reporters into a room without enough chairs. She went on to host 348 of them over 12 years. At time, women weren't allowed into presidential press events. These conferences saved their jobs. By 1940, 11 women had been hired as official White House correspondents, many because Eleanor insisted they be given access. She didn't give soft interviews. She pushed them on equal pay and civil rights. She helped them become voices in politics when few were listening. In 1935, she helped launch the National Youth Administration. She visited over 100 camps and found hopelessness. Suicide rates among teens were climbing. She wrote about it in her columns. She fought for job training, school aid, and mental health programs. The NYA helped over 2 million young people. Her push turned youth from a forgotten population into a priority. During the debate over the Fair Labor Standards Act, she gave testimony that shook Congress. She had visited a Georgia mill where 12-year-old kids worked 16 hours for 10 cents. She wrote down their names, described their faces, and spoke them aloud before lawmakers. On October 24, 1938, the law passed. It banned child labor and set a federal minimum wage. It gave dignity to 700,000 workers overnight. She also threw herself into the Federal Art Project. She fought to fund murals that showed lynchings and racial injustice. She stood against critics who wanted the art to stay pretty and safe. She believed art could expose truth. 5,000 artists found work through that program. They painted truth onto the walls of America. In Arthurdale, West Virginia, Eleanor found a mess. It was supposed to be a model community for minors, but the houses were crumbling and sewage ran in the yards. She drove there, walked through mud, and wrote angry letters to FDR demanding change. By 1934, 165 new homes stood there. She made sure they had plumbing, heat, and hope. She didn't want photo ops. She wanted roofs that didn't leak. In 1940, she toured munitions factories and saw women working with no safety gear. In one Ohio plant, 20% of the women had miscarriages from exposure to toxic dust. She raised alarm bells, forcing the government to improve factory conditions. She wasn't just the president's wife. She was a one-woman oversight committee. In 1942, she visited 40 USO camps. At segregated bases, she danced with black soldiers, shocking the country. Newspapers accused her of ruining the social order. She responded by saying segregation was un-American. Her actions helped shift public opinion and forced conversations about military integration. In 1943, she visited Manzanar, one of the internment camps where Japanese Americans were imprisoned. She saw families eating from communal troughs and wrote to FDR begging him to fix it. She called it inhumane. She demanded faster releases for citizens. Her visit made it harder for the government to pretend these places were humane. In 1944, she fought to make sure women veterans were included in the GI Bill. 40% of them had been denied benefits. She testified before Congress, quoting women who had served in the Women's Army Corps, but were told they didn't count. Her pressure worked. The law changed. Women got access to education, housing, and job help. Just like the men, President Truman surprised the political world in December 1945 when he appointed Eleanor Roosevelt as the U.S. delegate to the newly formed United Nations. At a time when women were rarely seen in positions of global authority, she walked into that building not just as a delegate, but as a symbol. Soon after, she became chair of the UN Commission on Human Rights. The world was still broken from war. America and the Soviet Union were drawing lines in the sand. But Eleanor refused to let ideology silence suffering. She fought to include economic rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Things like food, shelter, and medical care. While Soviet delegates pushed back hard, they accused her of using rights talk as a cover for Western interference. She didn't argue in theories. She showed them pictures of famine-stricken children from her travels. Hollow eyes and bone